History remembers Jackie Kennedy as poised, graceful, and untouchable. Yet behind closed doors, her longtime bodyguard reportedly witnessed moments the public was never meant to see. For decades, he kept those memories locked away, or so everyone believed. Now, after 50 years of silence, Jackie Kennedy's personal bodyguard is finally speaking out, forcing historians and fans alike to reconsider everything they thought they knew. What exactly was hidden, and why was it kept secret for so long? Long before she became an icon, Jacqueline Bouvier was a highly educated young woman working as a newspaper photographer in Washington when she met a charming, ambitious young politician named John F. Kennedy. The couple married in a massive, beautiful wedding in 1953, and their lives quickly moved into the high-stakes world of American politics. By 1961, John was elected as the 35th President of the United States. When they moved into the White House, they brought along their two young children, Caroline and John Jr., and for the first time in over half a century, the American public watched a young, vibrant family run around the executive mansion. This created the beautiful image that the media famously called Camelot. But while everyone saw a flawless fairy tale, the man standing just inches away witnessed a completely different reality. When Jackie Kennedy first moved into the White House, she viewed the Secret Service as an annoying invasion of her privacy. She fought hard against having a permanent security guard, preferring to slip away unnoticed whenever possible to protect her private moments. However, a young agent named Clint Hill was still assigned to her. At first, when Hill received the official assignment to guard her, he felt quite disappointed. Most young agents wanted the high-status, fast-paced action of the presidential detail, not the quiet task of shadowing a young mother. But none guessed that this forced arrangement would soon transform into an unbreakable partnership built on absolute loyalty. Surprisingly, Jackie Kennedy and Clint Hill's unexpected connection deepened during grueling diplomatic tours to India and Pakistan, far away from the regular American press corps. Hill became far more than a silent observer in a dark suit. He evolved into her steady emotional anchor in an overwhelming world that constantly demanded perfection. He learned her exact routines, anticipated her anxieties, and shielded her private vulnerabilities from aggressive news cameras. This intense, platonic closeness gave him a front-row seat to a complicated woman who desperately needed someone she could completely trust. The tight circle of security expanded when another young agent, Paul Landis, joined the team to protect the young children, Caroline and John Jr. This unique role gave Landis a completely unfiltered view of daily life inside the executive mansion. While everyday Americans looked at beautifully staged family magazine covers, Landis saw the messy human reality. He watched the children play, heard the quiet disagreements, and observed the normal family struggles that the polished Camelot fairy tale worked so hard to hide from the public. However, during the final days in August 1963, those hidden struggles turned into overwhelming heartbreak. The young couple suffered a devastating blow when their newborn son, Patrick, passed away only 2 days after his premature birth. The protective agents stood watch outside the quiet hospital doors, witnessing a level of raw, painful grief that the public cameras never saw. They observed the massive emotional strain this tragedy placed on the political marriage, alongside the quiet moments where the grieving parents leaned on each other for survival. By late autumn, a heavy sense of worry filled the Secret Service office as the agents began tracking a growing list of hostile political threats coming directly out of Texas. Despite these clear operational warnings, political advisors finalized the campaign route through Dallas. The security team meticulously double-checked their standard safety plans, thinking they were aware of everything. But none of their elite tactical training could prepare these men for the absolute pandemonium waiting in the Texas sunshine, a single moment that would shatter history in less than 4 seconds. The cheerful roar of over 100,000 excited spectators packed into Dealey Plaza vanished in a heartbeat. A sharp crack echoed off the concrete structures, sounding to many onlookers like a motorcycle backfire. Suddenly, devastating rifle shots tore through the autumn air and struck the president. In the back of the open-top limousine, the atmosphere completely reversed as the commander-in-chief suddenly slumped forward, clutching his throat. The festive parade transformed instantly into absolute terror before the crowd even realized what was happening. From the running board of the trailing security vehicle, Agent Clint Hill acted on pure adrenaline. He did not hesitate for a fraction of a second when the gunfire erupted. Hill leapt from his position and sprinted forward, chasing down the presidential limousine as it surged ahead. His boots pounded against the hot asphalt in a desperate attempt to reach the vehicle and shield the first family from the deadly rain of bullets. By the time he reached the rear bumper, the vehicle was picking up speed, forcing a frantic grab for the metal handholds. What Hill witnessed as he pulled himself onto the car trunk remains an incredibly haunting image. A completely traumatized Jackie Kennedy was scrambling blindly onto the rear hood of the moving vehicle. Driven by deep emotional shock, she crawled on her knees across the leather to retrieve agonizing fragments of her husband's shattered skull. Hill pushed her back down into the rear seat, spreading his body over her and the bleeding president to form a human shield against further incoming rounds. While Hill held the family down, another historic mystery was quietly unfolding inside the blood-stained vehicle. Agent Paul Landis noticed something extraordinary lodged directly in the seam of the leather seat cushion. It was a pristine, fully intact bullet that appeared to have popped loose from the president's back wound during the chaotic movement. Fearing a souvenir hunter would steal this vital evidence in the looming confusion, Landis made a quick decision to slide the projectile into his pocket. This hidden action would remain buried for 6 decades, altering everything the public thought they knew about the shooting. With the wounded president cradled in his wife's lap, the vehicle began a terrifying, high-speed dash toward the nearest medical facility. Hill remained spread-eagled across the trunk, feeling the intense wind and violent swerves as the driver pushed the engine to its limit. Jackie sat in frozen silence, her famous pink outfit covered in dark stains, staring blankly ahead as they fled the scene. As the limousine screeched to a halt at the emergency bay, the physical ambush was over, but an agonizing psychological battle for Jackie's survival was just beginning inside the hospital walls. Once they got into Parkland Memorial Hospital, it quickly turned into a chaotic scene of panic and confusion. Medical professionals rushed into Trauma Room 1, bringing in heavy equipment and working fruitlessly over the fallen leader. Amidst this frantic medical scramble, the First Lady stood entirely frozen against the wall. She remained an island of total silence in a room filled with shouting and frantic energy, refusing every gentle request from the hospital staff to step outside into the safety of the hallway. She chose instead to witness the final battle for his life, staring directly at the emergency table. Agents Clint Hill and Paul Landis stood shoulder to shoulder right next to her, forming a rigid physical barrier to keep unauthorized officials and curious bystanders away from her side. From this close vantage point, the guards watched the young mother drop directly to her knees on the blood-covered floor. She completely ignored the surrounding noise and began to pray quietly, her hands gently touching her husband as the doctors realized there was nothing more they could do to save his life. During these final, confusing moments in the operating room, Landis made a critical decision that would alter official historical records for over half a century. He pulled the pristine bullet from his pocket and carefully slid it onto the edge of the presidential hospital stretcher, hoping to keep the vital piece of evidence safe. He had no idea this quick, well-meaning action would create massive historical confusion, eventually giving birth to the highly debated single-bullet theory that would challenge official government findings for decades to come. After the official announcement of death, close aides repeatedly begged the grieving First Lady to remove her iconic pink wool suit and wash the visible stains from her skin. She fiercely pushed back against their emotional pleas, refusing to clean the blood from her face or hands. She looked directly at her close assistants and declared that she wanted everyone to see exactly what the attackers had done to her husband. She chose to wear the tragedy openly, using her outfit as a silent weapon against the people who destroyed her life. This powerful stance continued aboard the warm cabin of the presidential aircraft during the somber journey back to the Capitol. With the stained clothes, Jackie Kennedy stood directly beside Lyndon B. Johnson during his emergency inauguration ceremony, appearing like a frozen statue of absolute grief. The graphic stains on her clothing forced every government official in the tight room to look at the tragic cost of this sudden transition of power. While the global public marveled at her immense grace and composure during the state funeral, behind closed doors, a far darker psychological collapse was quietly unfolding away from the flashing cameras. The immediate aftermath of the tragedy left an invisible, devastating scar on the men who wore the protective black suits. Clint Hill returned to Washington carrying a crushing weight of emotional guilt that would torment his soul for decades. He constantly replayed those chaotic 3 seconds in his mind, tortured by the painful belief that if he had been a tiny fraction of a second faster, he could have taken the final fatal shot himself. This internal torment caused a severe downward spiral into deep depression and total isolation. Night after night, violent terrors woke him up in a cold sweat, forcing him to replay the nightmare of Dealey Plaza until he abruptly and completely walked away from his high-profile Secret Service career in 1975 to escape the haunting ghosts of his past. For over 50 years, both Clint Hill and Paul Landis abided by a strict, unwritten code of absolute silence. They did not view their intimate memories of Jackie Kennedy's private agony as a commercial commodity to sell to the highest bidder. Instead, they treated their experiences as a sacred professional trust that belonged entirely to the grieving family they protected. They turned down massive financial offers and constant media attention, choosing to carry the heavy secrets of that day completely alone in the shadows. They believed that some historical moments were too heavy to expose to a curious public, protecting the First Lady's dignity above all else. This long silence hid a massive, shocking flaw in the government's official investigation of the tragic assassination. Unknowingly, the famous Warren Commission, which was tasked with uncovering the definitive truth for the public, inexplicably forgot to interview Paul Landis altogether. His critical first-hand account of finding the pristine bullet on the limousine upholstery never made it into the official government files. By completely skipping Landis, federal investigators missed a massive detail that would challenge the foundation of their entire case, leaving a giant gap in American history that went unnoticed for over half a century. When Landis finally decided to share his shocking story after 6 decades, it shook modern historical circles to their core. His eyewitness testimony completely upends the official narrative by proving the pristine bullet came from the limousine seat, not from Governor John Connolly's hospital stretcher. This crucial detail suggests the bullet popped directly out of the president's shallow back wound before anyone reached the hospital, destroying the foundation of the famous single bullet theory. Without that specific theory, the entire mathematical logic behind a lone gunman falls apart completely, opening up the terrifying possibility of a second shooter. With the official narrative compromised and her trust in the state entirely broken, Jackie realized she could never find true peace or safety on American soil. In 1964, a few months after her husband died, Jackie relocated to a luxury apartment in the heart of New York City, yet this change of scenery did absolutely nothing to ease her racing mind. Being in America meant that a heavy cloud of severe post-traumatic stress disorder followed her everywhere she went. She became entirely convinced that her